A standalone dedicated Quidditch game is coming, but there's something the devs absolutely have to change. Something that could really make or break the success of this game and how many players will be interested in actively playing. So what's this problem I'm talking about? Well, it's actually a problem with Quidditch itself, at least how it's written in the books anyway, and how exactly that would translate to a video game. If you think about the movies, Quidditch isn't really a significant enough plot point there for most to even notice this, but the rules in the books are actually kind of head-scratching. Quidditch, as it's written in the books, is a completely untimed sport. The game only ends when the golden snitch is caught. Of course, each team has one player taking the role of Seeker, which is the only position allowed to catch the snitch. Oh, and there's also the fact that it's worth an extra 150 points to the team that catches it. So the situation we have here is that most of the action in Quidditch is centered around the other positions, with each team having 3 chasers, 2 beaters, and 1 keeper. Even if you look back to Harry Potter Quidditch World Cup in 2003, which was a dedicated game specifically for Quidditch, most of the action was all about the chasers. You have so much action and attention focused on these positions, and yet when the chasers do manage to score a goal past the other team's keeper, it's worth only 10 points. So in the vast majority of Quidditch games, the team whose Seeker catches the snitch is highly likely to be the winning team, even if the other 6 positions were significantly outplayed. And because it's the physical act of catching the snitch that wins a game, if the Seeker finds his or her team down more than 150 points, there'd be almost no reason to catch the snitch, even though that's exactly what Viktor Krum did in Book 4. But for a competitive video game, that just won't fly. Now, Quidditch World Cup had to change this up already, and as I already mentioned, in that game you primarily play as the chasers. Now, as you complete certain passes, do combos, and score goals, the meter in the center of the screen here will get closer and closer to the snitch, so it's actually rewarding the team that's doing better. Quidditch World Cup also makes it so the overall rankings are based on points, not wins and losses. So even if your team is down by more than 150 points, you still have at least some incentive to catch the snitch, because that's going to give you 150 points in the standings. Unfortunately, in Krum's situation, this was the final game of the season and didn't really matter. So you can start to see the problem here as we talk about an online competitive Quidditch game with players having the opportunity to play each of Quidditch's positions, and it's already been pretty much confirmed that all 7 positions are in the game. The position of the Seeker, how games end, and how many points are awarded from the snitch creates a few different problems for a video game version of the iconic Wizarding World sport that won't be easy to solve. All of these problems really center around you, the player, and keeping things challenging, but most importantly, keeping them fun. Because for any multiplayer-focused game to succeed, the #1 component needed is a strong, consistent player base. So the first problem with the canon rules for Quidditch is match length. The books even poke fun at the fact that games can quite literally end in seconds or even go on for days. So for a video game that is multiplayer and needs an active number of players to succeed, it's important for game length to be at least somewhat predictable, so there's a realistic expectation on how long each game will take. If games are too long, you risk players leaving in the middle of a match. If they're too short, you could have games that don't feel challenging or rewarding. You also have to factor in queue times that are inevitable for any multiplayer game in between matches. If the games themselves take too long to finish, this could result in even longer wait times for those trying to queue into a new match. But to be fair, that would be an issue no matter what if there's a small player base. So again, it's incredibly important to have a healthy base of players on and active most of the time. The second issue we have here is the vast point disparity between the catching of the snitch and the scoring of goals with the quaffle. We're talking a 140 point difference here, and I struggle to think of any real world sport examples that we can compare to this. I mean, just imagine if you're playing the role of an online Quidditch game. You block every shot that comes your way, your chasers do well and score 140 points, but then the other team's Seeker swoops in and catches the snitch to secure the victory. You essentially had 0 outcome on the final result of the match. And then there's the actual gameplay side of being a Seeker, which would be incredibly difficult to balance. I mean, the way it's written in the books, there are times where Harry's just kind of sitting there, looking around, trying to find a small little glimpse of gold in the corner of his eye. So the act of catching the snitch would need to be hard enough to prevent games from ending quickly, but not so hard that games go on for too long. So how do you do that and also keep those playing the position engaged and interested for the rest of the match? Think about this, guys. If the Seeker's only job is to catch the snitch and that's what ends the game, we would likely see players become so skilled that online games would end very quickly, and with the vast majority of players feeling like they did nothing to contribute to the end result. So how do the devs at Unbroken Studios balance all of this? How do they balance the canon and what we all love about the sport, but also make it so that each position feels valuable and fun to play, and also competitive? Let's take a look at 3 possible solutions. Option 1 is to actually keep the rules as close as possible to the book version, but place place an overall time limit on the game. Now, if the snitch isn't caught by that point, the game ends and the team with the most points wins. With this option, you'd really have to make sure that non-seeker players felt their contributions were actually worthwhile. You could do this through in-game experience points based on player performance. You could even do something like Quidditch World Cup, where your team actually earns points in the standings, so you could move up there even if you technically lost the match. But again, are we actually going to be having consistent teams on this? I don't think so. As far as how the experience would work, let's say you're playing Chaser and your team loses, but you personally still scored 5 goals on your own. You'd be rewarded for that in the form of XP, which would maybe grant you access to in-game rewards or cosmetic items, but you would definitely need to have that incentive that even if you lose the game, there's still a reason for you to go all out when you're playing as Chaser, Beater, or Keeper. Personally, I don't love this option. So let's take a look at the next one, and this would be to use rules similar to those created by the International Quidditch Association. Yeah, if you didn't know, Quidditch, or quad ball as it's called now, is actually a sport we muggles play in the real world, minus the whole flying in the air bit. Now, their rules start with what's in the source material, but they have a few key modifications to not only make the sport work in the real world, but to also deal with the issues that we outlined before. And again, it all starts with the Seeker. So under the IQA rules, Seekers actually don't start the game on the pitch. Instead, they enter play after 18 minutes of game time. Catching the snitch is also worth just 30 points instead of 150. Now, if the team that catches the snitch is leading after the 30 points are awarded, that team wins and the game is over. However, if the catching team is behind after the 30 points are awarded, the game proceeds to an overtime period. So in the overtime, it actually removes both the Seekers and the snitch. Oh, and by the way, in this version of Quidditch, the snitch is actually a person who runs around with snitch tag velcroed to the back of their shorts. Again, not kidding. All right, with the snitch and both Seekers removed from play, a target score is calculated by taking the non-snitch catching team's total and adding 30 points to it. All right, let's have a little Hogwarts example here to help us out. Let's say Gryffindor is leading Slytherin by a score of 50-0. Slytherin then catches the snitch, giving them 30 points. Our new score is Gryffindor 50 and Slytherin 30. We would then proceed to that overtime period, but we need to calculate that target score. So the officials would take Gryffindor's score of 50 and they would add 30 to it, which means the target score for both teams is now 80 points. Score remains the same, overtime period begins, and then both teams are attempting to reach that target score in order to win. No Seekers, though, on the playing field. Now, in my opinion, this would bring even more issues into a video game version of Quidditch, because if you think about it, it really significantly reduces the role of Seeker, where you would actually want to play that position, especially if you're not even going to be out on the field for part of the game. So finally, we're left with what I think is the best solution, and it's sort of a combination between the first two. I think you would have to start by having timed periods or maybe quarters, but also lower the points awarded when the snitch is caught. Now, here's the big difference. Rather than ending the game when the snitch is caught, it basically just acts like any other goal. You stop play for a minute, get all the teams back in the starting position, and then you go again. The Seekers can catch the snitch again and again and again for, I don't know, maybe 25, 30, 50 points. This is really where these play tests could come in handy, because they're going to be able to figure out exactly how these games play out. Now, I think this would keep Seekers engaged for the whole game and also wouldn't minimize their role, because it would allow for multiple catches of the snitch. It would also still help teams catch up quickly if they had a top-notch Seeker who could score multiple catches of the snitch in quick succession, and at the same time, the Chasers, Beaters, and Keepers, all of a sudden those positions are on much more equal footing with the Seeker and are actually making worthwhile contributions to the match that affect the outcome. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, and check out the video on the right side of your screen for the good news and bad news related to those ongoing playtests. As always, guys, thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.